Keep my distance away, capturing moments that belong to your world. Each snapshot I take leaves my feelings unfurled. Through my lens I study every move you make. As I fulfill my commission, my heart starts to break. 'Cause you'll never notice me behind this glass, just another servant letting summer pass.
No matter how great the joy of the men and women of Estolia, a profound sadness parallels it when deity calls home early the favored few. Some hold that the trials faced by those in power reveal the depth of deity's favor upon our lives. Personal and poignant tragedies among deity's blessed serve to help those with fewer blessings recognize what they possess and cherish what they have rather than lament what they lack. Reflections on Abdication, Sebastian Zacarian.
Bethany finished and flicked off the dark room's red light. Darkness swallowed the room. She closed her eyes as the darkness pressed against her eyelids, leaning her head against the doorframe. An ache in her shoulders and emptiness in her stomach emerged. Fumbling for the handle, she opened the door. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed the sunset's vibrant colors were nearly gone from the horizon. She turned away from the fading sunset's splendor, stripping off her clothes as she headed to the bedroom, letting them drop wherever they fell. She would pick them up later. She needed to take a shower to scrub away the layers of dust and grime from days spent developing photographs. If only she could wash away the dark thoughts clinging to her mind like a swarm of Estolian bats, big, hairy, creepy bats. As the shower warmed up, she busied herself by brushing her hair, avoiding her reflection. Lately, she couldn't bring herself to meet her own gaze, disliking the uncertainty mirrored in her eyes. Fear crept into her heart, a shadow she wasn't ready to confront. Once under the shower, the water drummed against her shoulders. She let the warm spray massage her tensions and fears away, though the pressing realization loomed. In a week, maybe 2, there would be no reason left for her to stay in Estolia. They had only been in Estolia for 5 days when Sebastian married Melanie. Within months, Princess Jackie's waistline thickened and excitement buzzed through the palace at the prospect of the new heir apparent. As the coronation day loomed, Bethany was troubled by just one thing: Gregory. She had fallen for him the instant they met, but he remained an enigma, revealing nothing of his feelings. With Melanie married and immersed in her passion for horses, Bethany and Gregory adeptly documented the matrimonial ceremonies of the heir apparent and his beautiful bride. As Jackie's pregnancy progressed, they joined forces with Melanie, Sebastian, and Gregory to capture the details of the transition year. They even recreated key events from before their arrival in Estolia, like Gregory's appointment as the last resort and the abdication by both men. Thinking about Gregory always stirred her anxiety. She reached for the shampoo, shifting her thoughts to what lay ahead. Her father had never fully acknowledged her, still holding her responsible for her mother's death when she was born. Indifferent housekeepers had raised her in early childhood, followed by years at boarding schools. When her passion for photography blossomed, he tolerated it, relieved she could sustain herself with her talent. On her 18th birthday, he presented her with new photographic equipment, a silent farewell. As she rinsed her hair, the emptiness of her life loomed large. With Melanie happily married, Bethany felt the absence of her partner acutely. She would assist in refining the documentation of the transition year, yet there was little left to chronicle. She turned off the water and stepped out of the shower, grabbing a towel from the heated rack. As she dried her hair and body, she mulled over the true source of her unease. 10 months with Gregory Zacarian had led her through highs of happiness and lows of despair. She was in love with him, longing to be part of his life. Yet, he never seemed interested in letting their relationship grow beyond the surface pleasure of their shared moments. As she dressed, memories of the previous night played in her mind. They had enjoyed a pleasant evening in the grand sitting room, where King Maximilian and Queen Catherine typically spent their evenings. She smiled, reminding herself to think of Leo as the king and Jackie as his queen. They were there too, and Bethany sat holding Isaiah, the newest heir. A deep, painful yearning to have a child of her own welled up inside her. Gregory spent much of his time with her, but despite the shared kisses and companionship, he never progressed their relationship further. She wanted him to want to create a child with her. She yearned to be more than just a casual date in his life. Once dressed, she gazed into the mirror, unsure of the source of her restlessness. Leaving her bedroom, she paused to admire the elegance of the sitting room. The tower suite was magnificent, enveloping her in a sense of royalty. The main level housed a sitting room, bedroom, bathroom, and a room she transformed into a dark room. A spiral staircase ascended to the tower's upper level, with another bedroom and bathroom. Melanie had occupied that room during their first 5 days in Estolia, before moving in with Sebastian. Soon they settled into a charming mansion crafted for the royal stable manager, enjoying their togetherness and planning ways to enhance the Estolian's breed. Her presence in Estolia wasn't truly necessary. It had always been a ploy to bring Melanie here. Doubts lingered over whether anything she had spent nearly a year preparing would ever be published. A light tap on her door had her calling out,
"Please come in."
Xavier, clad in his religious attire, wheeled into her sitting room. He flashed her the same congenial smile he always did.
"Do you have a moment to talk?"
he asked.
"Of course."
She replied, moving to the sitting area and settling into a chair. She waited as he wheeled himself closer.
"I wish to speak with you,"
he said,
"about the project you are currently working on, and about an extension of the project if you are willing."
She focused intently on him, resisting the urge to question whether her original commission would ever be published. She feared confirming her doubts, and knew she might not believe him, even if he reassured her.
"I realize your original contract is nearly complete. Would you be open to starting on a new project?"
"Tell me about it."
she invited. Talking with Xavier always seemed to dispel her doubts, but those uncertainties crept back during long hours spent developing photographs.
"I understand you are still wrapping up details on the original project, especially with Melanie focused entirely on her husband and horses. This morning, as I reflected on the coronation and recalled seeing you holding the future king of Estolia, it became clear what I should ask you. It is a sacrifice on your part, as I know Estolia has become a home for your soul. But if you are willing, I believe the best choice would be for you to continue documenting the Estolian nation, its religion and global presence. My question is, would you be open to extending your contract with a new commission?"
"I'm willing if it's something I'm capable of doing,"
she said after a moment of thought.
"I would ask you to travel to Barcelona to photograph key elements of the Estolian community and the royal stable. Sebastian and Melanie would like to join you, visiting the stables to ensure they adhere to the specialized breeding program established in Estolia. After Barcelona, your journey would continue to the west coast of Canada, to Vancouver, British Columbia. As with the community in Barcelona, the goal is to document the similarities and differences among the three locales, Canada, Spain, and Estolia. Your tour would conclude with a visit to the less centrally located community in California, situated around San Francisco.
She listened to him speaking the whole time, watching the way his expressions animated his face.
"What about when I'm done in California?"
She asked.
You will return to Estolia to develop the photographs. Once you have them, I trust you and Gregory can add words to create a photo documentary of Estolia, the transition, and the various Estolian communities. We will then meet to discuss future commissions.
I see you, but you'll never see me. Just another memory in your dynasty. When the book is finished, I'll fade away like prints in water.
When my first granddaughter married, I found myself reflecting back on the years I spent in Estolia, how quickly they flew, how marvelous they were. It seemed strange that I could have spent 22 years ignorant of the existence of Estolia, and the next nearly 50 years steeped in the traditions and perspective that so thoroughly defines the people of this glorious nation. I often thanked deity in my prayers or while listening to my children and grandchildren praying for giving me the incredible gift of calling myself Estolian. Elena de los Santos, inscrito.
In her hotel room, a message awaited her on the side table, neatly folded with Xavier's name on top. As she unfolded it, a shiver made its way from her arms to the nape of her neck, paired with a sense of inevitable destiny.
Theo arriving July 1st. Stop. You will return with him to Estolia immediately. Stop. Xavier.
The 7 months apart from Estolia had been enlightening. Initially, Sebastian and Melanie accompanied her, but later, to Gregory's discontent, she travelled with 6 Estolian men. All slightly older than Gregory and nearing 30, each was on a quest for the perfect woman to keep their soul. In Barcelona, 2 of her companions parted ways, having discovered their Kayleys. The third, Saul, accompanied her until Great Britain. An engine hiccup had them spending extra time at the airport, and it was there Saul met a woman Bethany found a bit awkward. This woman, seemingly unsure of how to respond to Saul's undeniable charm, eventually captured his heart. Together, they planned their return to Estolia to solidify their bond. In Vancouver, 2 more of her companions were captivated by the designate's twin daughters. The designate, having lost his son to polio, harbored bitterness that strained his connection with his Kaylee. Yet the arrival of the young men from Estolia brought about a surprising transformation. Their presence began to heal the rift within the designate's family, guided, as it seemed, by the hand of deity. In California, the last of her Estolian companions promptly met the young woman destined to be his Kaylee. Not long after, Bethany encountered Nathaniel Montclair. His son, Thaddeus, stood out as one of the state's wealthiest young men and, in Bethany's eyes, among the kindest she had ever known.
"I'm going to meet Theo at the airport,"
Thaddeus told her,
"and bring him to meet with my father. When they are done, I'll bring him to join you."
Thaddeus suggested she wait for Theo on a houseboat at Lake Tahoe, where an extended party was underway. The experience felt strange to her. For 18 months, she had been surrounded almost exclusively by Estolians. Though Thaddeus and Nathaniel were not Estolian, they had warm ties with a few Estolian families. She missed the certainty and sense of destiny that the Estolians exuded like a cloak. She had grown accustomed to their way of life, where wine was enjoyed, but never in excess. The sight of people smoking was a jarring return to a different reality. Melanie always believed smoking was harmful to horses and deemed cigarettes a fire risk in the stable. Bethany, friends with Melanie long before she ever considered smoking, was influenced by Melanie's perspective and chose to avoid the habit. The atmosphere felt stifling as she noticed nearly every man at the party smoking and drinking. The contrast between Estolians and Americans had never been clearer. Her heart lay in Estolia, with no yearning to return permanently to the United States, even if Gregory no longer wanted her. She had found the place that resonated with her soul. A phonograph blared loud music, making Bethany yearn for the gentle melodies typical in Estolia, the clean air, and the natural way Estolians engaged with each other. As the evening progressed, she chose to retreat to her room. The Graciela, though luxurious for a houseboat, lacked the most crucial element, the people of Estolia, especially Gregory. Theo was scheduled to join her the next day. She would be relieved to return to Estolia.
Work of art in a foreign land. I finally found my way. Love's gentle promise lights up every day.
He takes without recourse His foes surrender, declare they yield. They kneel before his force. Nothing remains, it's all up in flames.
When I began writing the history of modern Estolia, I was unaware of the challenge that awaited me. I could never have predicted the discoveries I'd make, unraveling the intricate threads that wove into the extraordinary 89th iteration of Estolian leadership. The biggest difficulty, once I had the information gathered in one place, was recognizing how dark and selfish the megalomaniacal actions of some men could be, focusing on their own power and wealth to the detriment of the entire species. Without Darren and the solace his soul provided, I doubt I could have withstood the relentless psychological onslaught of such raw selfishness. Meredith Zacarian, Preface, 2nd edition of the History of Modern Estolia.
Wyatt looked at the Graciela. It was a moonless night. He took the time to look around the area methodically, slowly, carefully. He would not continue with his commission until he was certain he was unobserved. As a man of few words, Wyatt's employers often underestimated him, unaware of his true intellect. While he meticulously scanned the surroundings, automatically cataloguing every detail in his mind, memories of the conversations between Jenkins and the client lingered. The deference Jenkins showed spoke volumes. It was a clear warning that failure was not an option, lest he find himself floating face down in a swimming pool. His scanning eyes paused, and he waited, attuned to the subtle warning that stirred his senses. When the cause revealed itself, a couple of raccoons tussling over a paper sack, Wyatt resumed his deliberate scan and mental cataloguing. The client, likely oblivious to Wyatt's ability to speak Dutch, had no idea that their conversation about the target, a woman from the east coast of the United States, had been noted and filed away. Though Wyatt was unaware of the reasons behind the client's lethal request, he understood the consequences of failure all too well. The ire of either man was something he had no desire to provoke should he not honor the contract's stipulations. With his slow scan complete, Wyatt moved with confident strides toward the Graciela. A shout of greeting pierced the night, but he pressed on, unfazed. From the corner of his eye, he noticed two men, their speech slurred with drink, calling from one houseboat to another. In under 90 seconds he boarded the boat, making his way down to the inner lounge. He paused there, attuning his senses to the gentle sway of the water beneath. The question lingered. Was the fancy craft empty, or did another presence share the boat with him? Within minutes, Wyatt discerned that no one aboard the boat was awake. Whether any crew lay sleeping was uncertain, but the present calm worked to his advantage. Swiftly, he located the access panel required for his task. As he set to work, the foreigner's words echoed in his mind.
"Thaddeus must pay,"
the man said.
"I wish to see him bleed. Slowly, for decades. I wish him to wonder what might have been."
"Wyatt is my best. He can make a surgical strike with precision,"
Jenkins boasted.
"I wish it to be anything but precise or surgical. I wish it to be messy."
The client was emphatic, sick, demented, and rich. His boss didn't worry about the reasons behind the jobs he curated. The only motivation was the number of zeros involved by the remuneration. The two men discussed what Wyatt would do. He would destroy the Graciela at 2:22 in the afternoon. The ship would sink. The passengers would burn, drown, or be dismembered. Some would live, but not the target. Wyatt was proud of his work. With precision in the near-total darkness, he placed the charge and set the timer.
Thaddeus must pay for every stolen breath. Thaddeus must pay a dance with living death. Thaddeus must pay, his paradise will fall. Thaddeus must pay, he'll lose it all.
Georgianne looked around at the wealthy people attending the party. Everyone was beautiful, dressed expensively, making small talk. Her father was speaking with Germain Masterson, talking up his investments. Her attention turned from her father to a dainty woman walking towards her.
"My name is Maria."
the beauty stated. Blushing, she glanced towards her father. He was listening.
I'm Georgianne,
she said obediently. He would hate to hear her introducing herself as anything other than Georgianne. She felt as if her identity as a woman was buried beneath her father's need to have a child with his name. She was grateful that her mother was successful in making sure her name was hyphenated. If her father had his way, she would have been named George with a middle name of Anne. She shrugged off thoughts of her name and turned her attention to the woman speaking with her.
Do you have a nickname?
Maria asked her. She shook her head. Someday she might ask to be called something else, but that was decades in the future when her father was no longer a daily part of her life. On her 16th birthday, her mother told her,
you are not your name, Jojo.
Her mother's nickname was one she used in private moments when her father was not around.
You are a wonderful, beautiful, engaging young woman. Everyone who sees you thinks you look like an angel. When they hear your name, that doesn't change what they think about you.
What brings you to this party?
Maria asked her. Georgianne gestured to her father.
My father is great friends with Nathaniel and Thaddeus. Thaddeus couldn't make it, but invited us to come to his party.
You know Thaddeus?
Maria asked, a jealous tone in her voice.
He's quite nice,
Georgianne said. The eccentric entrepreneur was one of the nicest people she had ever met.
What brings you here?
She asked the beautiful woman. For the next half hour, Georgianne had a pleasant conversation with Maria. She learned that Maria and Thaddeus had just become engaged, though they were waiting to announce it publicly.
I love.
Maria began to speak, but then she turned with a frown and glanced over towards where Georgianne's father was seated.
Oh no,
she whispered. A moment after that, she leaped towards Georgianne, knocking her backwards off her feet. Then the entire universe shifted, and agony was slicing through her face and arm as she hurtled through the air, and the world itself disintegrated into chaos. The engine housing, directly behind Maria, erupted in a frothing torrent of water and flames. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as she flew through the air and landed with a wrench in the water. Stunned, she could not breathe. And then someone was pulling her to the surface of the water and holding her up. From that position, she watched as the boat started to burn and then slowly sank. Her awareness sank with it, and she believed that her own life was going to be measured in the minutes and seconds remaining to the charred wreckage that was submerging in front of her.
He doesn't know her fragile grace conceals my dark disguise. I watch them walking hand in hand beneath the summer sky, and know the perfect instrument with which his dreams will die.
Bethany heard a dull crack followed by a blast of heat. Everything seemed to change, go in slow motion. She swiveled to look behind her, seeing that the houseboat was on fire, exploding. She saw several individuals flying through the air, and it was only as she focused in on one woman flying towards her that she realized that she herself was airborne. When she hit the water, she was full of remorse that she never got the chance to share her feelings with Gregory. She was going to die, and he would never know how special he was to her. When she pulled herself to the surface of the water, she realized that only moments had passed. The houseboat was still actively exploding and rapidly sinking. Her attention turned from the destroyed vessel and focused on the silver-blonde hair of the woman who surfaced near her. Bethany kicked closer, hesitating only a moment when she saw the white of bone swathed in red that was one side of her face. She supported the injured woman's body against her own. Screams, sobs, and the sound of flames being extinguished by the lake water all assaulted her ears. She and the woman she was supporting were not the only ones alive. A few moments later, she saw several other boats in the vicinity were approaching.
Thaddeus must pay for every stolen breath. Thaddeus must pay a dance with living death. Thaddeus must pay, his paradise will fall. Thaddeus must pay, he'll lose it all. With mother gone, the world turned cold and gray. You faced the dawn and found a brighter way. A Georgiana strength you hold inside, a quiet courage, nowhere left to hide.
Of all the religious belief systems extant, I was most fascinated by the Estolian faith. After I lost my Maria, I searched every system out there, seeking comfort, but in the end, it was the Estolian faith I selected. I believed I would see her again in Tarizan if I followed the teachings of Zacharias. I would live in accordance with the faith, secure in the promised reward. It was easy enough to do for a single man like myself. Nearly all of his teachings were about marital relationships, and I would never marry. Not without my Maria. Thaddeus Montclair, Personal Journal.
Bethany's eyes fluttered open, and she found herself face to face with Theo. She nearly questioned why he was there, but the recollection of the explosion suddenly rushed back, causing her to shudder and close her eyes again. Recognizing the sterile environment of a hospital room, semi-private with just 2 beds, she felt disoriented and groggy. The horrific memory of the woman she had tried to save, her face marred by protruding bones and a ruined eye, filled Bethany with a wave of nausea.
"How are you feeling?"
Theo asked softly, his voice gentle. He scooted his chair a little closer and took her hand, his touch steady and brotherly.
Exhausted.
Bethany rasped, grimacing.
My ribs hurt.
"Do you remember the explosion?"
Theo asked. When she nodded, he continued.
"The blast from the boat shattered several ribs on your right side. The doctors do not believe there are any other injuries."
Bethany hesitated, her voice trembling.
What about the woman I tried to save? I need to know if she survived.
"She lives. As I understand it, her father was killed in the disaster."
He looked mournful.
"Thaddeus is paying for her medical care, but she is all alone in the world now."
Bethany's stomach churned at the memory of the woman's injuries, and she struggled to find the right words.
What?
She asked softly, her voice trembling as she tried to ask the question tactfully.
"You wish to know what injuries she sustained?"
Theo finished Bethany's question gently.
"The left side of her face and her left arm both took the brunt of the explosion. Her jaw was shattered, she lost her left eye and her left forearm. It will be several months before she is healed. You saved her life. She would have drowned if you did not help her."
Couldn't she come to Estolia to heal?
Bethany inquired, her voice filled with concern. A slight crease formed on Theo's brow as he pondered Bethany's question. After a brief moment, his expression softened into a peaceful nod.
"You are most thoughtful, Bethany. I believe she will flourish in Estolia if given the time to recuperate. I shall discuss it with my father before extending the invitation to her. The doctors have suggested that you remain here in the United States for a couple more weeks before attempting to fly."
As Georgianne regained consciousness, she found a nurse by her bedside.
"How are you?"
the nurse asked gently. Unable to respond verbally, the nurse quickly clarified,
"You won't be able to speak right away. Your jaw is wired shut."
For the next couple of days, Georgianne remained in the intensive care unit. Nurses drifted in and out, but only a few offered words. During the first 24 hours, measured by the clock above the door, her life seemed to pitch and roll between dueling extremes. She would surface from restless sleep to razor-sharp pain radiating through her face, barely able to move before pain forced her hand to the call button. The arrival of a nurse, sometimes silent, sometimes kind, meant relief in the form of pain medicine flowing through her IV. By the second day, the excruciating pain in Georgianne's face had dulled to a more manageable level. When the nurse arrived to administer more pain medicine, she waved her off. The nurse insisted gently,
"I'll just give you half the dose, then. You don't want to cut it off completely."
She woke on the second evening to find, for the first time, that she was not alone. Thaddeus Montclair sat at her bedside, accompanied by another man she didn't recognize. Thaddeus's eyes were red-rimmed and heavy with dark circles, clear signs he hadn't slept, and had likely been crying. She remembered Maria, Thaddeus's fiancée, and how Maria had pushed her away from the explosion, probably saving her life. Thaddeus's voice was rough, almost hoarse when he finally spoke.
Hello, Georgianne. How are you?
She couldn't respond to his greeting. By now she had learned to treat all questions as rhetorical, so she waited. Thaddeus let the silence hang for a moment, and then said,
I'm sure you want to know what's happened. I'm guessing no one has bothered to tell you about the accident or your injuries.
She gave a brief nod. She knew something was wrong with her left side. Her left eye couldn't see and her left arm felt numb, strangely heavy. At least one nurse had avoided looking at her altogether, as if she were too hideous to behold.
They say there was a buildup of gasoline fumes in the engine housing,
Thaddeus explained softly.
The fumes caught fire and caused an explosion.
His haggard appearance hinted that his fiancée, Maria, was one of the casualties. She wished she could find some way to comfort him.
About half the people on the houseboat suffered some type of serious injury, while the others sustained only minor injuries,
Thaddeus said with a heavy voice.
12 of my guests were killed in the disaster. I don't know how to say this gently, Georgianne. Your father didn't make it.
She'd already assumed he was either dead or gravely injured. From that one frozen instant when the explosion erupted, 2 images remained with her. First, Maria, outlined by a strangely beautiful, malevolent fireball about to devour her, and, over Maria's shoulder, the other figure she'd recognized, already fully engulfed in flames. Her father.
You had a pretty devastating injury, Georgianne,
Thaddeus said softly.
The left side of your face and left arm took the brunt of the explosion. The doctors had to remove your left arm from the elbow down.
He paused, his voice heavy with sorrow.
And you'll be in the hospital for another 2 weeks or so while your facial wounds heal.
With her right hand, she reached up and touched the thick bandages on her face.
You lost your left eye, and your jaw was shattered. You have a wound there that will take some time to heal. That's the main reason you need to remain in the hospital.
Her brow furrowed as she wondered what wasn't injured or destroyed. Thaddeus answered her unasked question.
Your face will be scarred on the left side, but you should be able to speak. We're not sure yet about your hearing on the left. It may take a while before we know how much will return. The good news is that aside from the damage to your face and arm, you were almost completely unharmed.
Thaddeus gestured to the other man, saying,
This is Theo Zacarian. One of his relatives was also injured in the explosion. She kept you from drowning once you were in the lake. She wants to be sure you recover. Theo, this is George and Stavros.
He was a serious-looking man with silver blonde hair and a well-groomed goatee. His eyes were a light, almost icy grey. When she realized she was staring, she glanced away, and only then noticed Thaddeus was gone, leaving her alone with this stranger.
Please call me Theo,
he said as she looked back at him.
Somehow you seem more like a Georgiana to me.
His whole demeanor shifted, a quick spark in his expression, as if someone had switched on a light inside him.
Would it bother you if I called you Georgiana?
She liked the way it sounded, softened, familiar. Even her father might have approved. She shook her head. She did not mind.
My cousin, Bethany Danielson, had her ribs cracked in the explosion. Even so, she managed to keep your head above water so you wouldn't drown before help arrived. We would be most grateful if you would allow us to care for you while you recover. Does this meet with your approval?
Something about the silver-grey eyes, the quiet sincerity in his gaze, made her agree to his plan.
In 2 or 3 weeks, when you are ready to travel, we'll fly together to Estolia. It's a Mediterranean island south of Barcelona. You'll be able to recuperate in our family home for as long as you need. When you're fully recovered, we'll help you with your next step, whatever that may be.
With mother gone, the world turned cold and gray. You faced the dawn and found a brighter way. A Georgiana strength you hold inside, a quiet courage, nowhere left to hide. Nephew, here you stand, On the threshold of devotion, a question weighs upon your heart, a ripple in the ocean. This interview will determine the pathway of your fate, your life's companion, your Kele, your mate.
To many of the men of Estolia gifted to see the aura of their Kele, it is an element of attraction, a special gift, a way for deity to guide them. The aura is the visual manifestation of the soul of a man's Kele, revealed for him to see. When a man can see his future wife's aura, his soul itself recognizes its future home. Viewing the aura is that which occurs when a man is fully in tune with his soul and listens to what it says. Not every man listens, but every soul recognizes its home. Theobaldo Reginald Zacarian, Capitulo 87.
Gregory dismounted, passing Tribeca's reins over to a handy acolyte. He watched as she was led away. She was getting a little fat, he thought. He heard a horse cantering up and swiveled in time to see Theo dismounting. Another acolyte approached and took Theo's horse's bridle. Theo strode briskly over to where Gregory was standing.
"How are you doing, Theo?"
Gregory asked. Theo looked strained and distant. Gregory wished he did not ask. When he did respond, however, he sounded as amiable as ever.
I am doing well, Gregory. Like you, my 30th birthday is in 3 days.
"Do you think that is why your father summoned us to the temple?"
Gregory asked him, as they both ascended the stairs to the impressive double-doored entrance.
I am certain of it, Gregory,
Theo said. They walked quietly through the doors and went to the office of the keeper. Once they were in the office, Xavier looked up from the paperwork on his desk and smiled at his son and his nephew.
"Come in and have a seat,"
he said, gesturing to the conference table. Gregory waited until his uncle had wheeled his chair to the head of the conference table before he sat down. It always seemed coincidental that he and Theo shared a birthday, and their older brothers were only 1 week apart.
You wish to ask if either of us have encountered our Kele?
Theo stated. Xavier nodded, his attention mostly centered on Gregory rather than Theo.
Have you?
Gregory felt self-conscious. He knew who he wanted to keep his soul. When he was supposed to be the keeper, he would have expected to see her aura, but now that he was just an ordinary Estolian, he wasn't sure if he still had to see an aura for her to be the correct woman.
"I have seen no aura,"
he admitted in answer to his uncle's question.
"But that doesn't mean that I don't know who I wish to gift my soul unto."
He felt belligerent. If Xavier told him he couldn't have her, he wasn't sure he would accept that verdict.
The key in a situation like this is whether or not she wishes to accept your soul,
Xavier said. He glanced towards his son briefly before saying,
Nearly all the women born in Estolia find the man whose soul they keep amongst the men born here. But perhaps 15 to 20% of Estolian men do not find their Kele on the island. In those situations, it is typical, even critical, for them to be gifted with the aura. How else would they know if she would be capable of keeping their soul and accept the teachings of Zacharias? The aura is in place to help in those situations. It's not universal. There have even been...
He paused and leaned backwards in his wheeled chair before finishing.
3 or 4 monarchs who didn't see the aura.
Gregory frowned and glanced from Theo to Xavier.
"Bethany isn't Estolian,"
he stated.
"I know she is right for me. Deity has whispered consistently in my ear and told me she is mine, and I am hers from the moment I met her, just after Sebastian and I both abdicated."
He didn't add the fact that since her accident, she had been distant from him. Nor did he share his deep-seated fear that she did not reciprocate his feelings, or that she had found someone to give the gift of her purity during her absence. His gut congealed every time he considered if she would reject him. Xavier said,
Before she left on her commission, you spent a good amount of time with her. I saw more than once when you kissed her. Did you, Gregory, take her purity?
Gregory sat upright, staring at his uncle, shocked at the question. His eyes met his uncle's as he responded,
"I've kissed Bethany Danielson. I've dreamed of doing more, but always I've respected the woman that she is, and the woman she can be. I have known since I first met her that I wanted to give my soul into her keeping."
When his uncle was silent, he added formally,
"As the son of the king, I say unto you that I have always treated Bethany Danielson in all ways consistent with any daughter of Estoliana. I have honored and protected her virtue.
Xavier looked convinced but still solemn.
And have you, Gregory, given her the attention since her return that you so freely gave her prior to her departure?
I was afraid of being tempted beyond my ability to control,
he admitted.
So I have kept her a little more distant.
Xavier smiled at that.
I believe you'll find real happiness with Bethany.
He grew serious.
I sent her on that commission because at the time she had only two choices. Without it, she would have either left Estolia for good or given her purity to you before you turned 30. Sending her away was the only way I could safeguard your future happiness, even if it cost you those 7 months of sorrow.
We have the sanction of the church,
he asked his uncle. Xavier nodded.
If you can wait until your birthday, then yes, the church gives its blessing. I would advise you not to be alone with Bethany, but do make time to share your feelings with her. I think this has been especially hard for her. She knows much of what our faith teaches about marriage, but I do not think she has ever matched that with how hesitant you have been. She needs to know you care, and more than that, Gregory, she needs to believe you truly want a child with her. I cannot say why that matters so much to her.
Xavier's brow furrowed.
Can you speak openly with her, while still keeping others nearby?
Gregory nodded. He did not need an aura, and he would claim the woman he had fallen in love with more than 18 months ago. Xavier turned his attention to his son, and his voice was gentle when he asked,
And you, Theo?
Theo closed his eyes and lifted his chin. He took a deep, calming breath, followed by several others.
From the moment her wounds were freed from the enclosing bandages that obscured her face, I have been enthralled by the extraordinary beauty of Georgiana's soul.
Xavier nodded.
I have ordered that the royal suite and the companion suite be prepared for 3 nights hence.
The weight of this great vow, to honor her, to hold her dear, here and now, once joined to be together, to share every breath, to always keep her close, and to follow her in death. We sat beneath the ancient tree's shade, with tangled hearts and plans we made. She said she'd keep my soul in her care, an understanding we'll forever share.
I often wondered why my brother ventured up to the elbow on the day of our 38th birthday. I knew, however, that even if I asked, he would never quite answer the question. Just as I had when we were boys and he broke his leg, I felt certain my own actions had somehow brought about this latest injury. The hardest thing I had to face from that day onward was the sight of my brother confined to a wheelchair. As sovereign, I had few obligations. Why did deity ask Xavier to make the sacrifice I would willingly have made? In writing this question to myself, I find the answer as well. Had I fallen, he could not have helped me as I helped him. Maximiliano Zacarian, Capitulo 86.
As Georgiana sat before the vanity mirror, her single arm resting in her lap, Bethany gently brushed her silver blonde hair. They had grown inseparable ever since the flight to Estolia. Since the tower suite had become Bethany's home, she invited Georgiana to move in, giving her the downstairs room for ease. Yet the two spent nearly all their time together. Brushing Georgiana's hair had become a shared comfort while they recuperated, Bethany savoring the quiet intimacy of each gentle stroke. She ran her fingertips through the fine silver-blonde strands and, after a pause, glanced up at the mirror. Her gaze met Georgiana's single watchful eye, and a blush warmed her cheeks.
My mother was like that too,
Georgiana said, flashing Bethany a single dimple in a mischievous grin. But as she caught sight of herself in the mirror, the humor vanished as abruptly as a snuffed candle.
I've been told my hair is my best feature, even if...
She gestured vaguely to her face, where the wounds along her jaw and temple remained raw and red. The blast had destroyed her eye socket. Instead of a glass eye, the doctors had fitted her with a black patch, stark against her pale skin. Beneath the lower edge of her eye patch, the skin along her upper cheek and jaw was still mending. For the first weeks, The wound had left the repaired bone exposed, a stark reminder, with every glance in the mirror, of all she had lost. Now, after diligent daily care, the flesh had closed at last. Her doctor said she was fortunate, healing as swiftly as she did. In another month or two, the wounds on her face would finish healing. Within a few years, even the redness of the scars would fade. The near-total severing of her ear left that side of her face lopsided and unbalanced. The wonder was that she didn't have any hearing loss at all. She was also extremely lucky her scalp had been spared. Her hair was growing back beautifully, and the asymmetry of lengths looked deliberate. After an awkward silence, Georgiana said,
It takes some getting used to.
She raised her right hand, fingertips brushing lightly over the edge of the eye patch and the scars beneath. Her gaze drifted from her reflection, unfocused, a small crease deepening between her brows.
I'm lucky to be alive,
she said, her voice trailing away in a whisper. Bethany hesitated, wanting to offer comfort but uncertain how. She rested a hand lightly on Georgiana's shoulder, wishing there was something she could say to ease her friend's quiet sorrow. Taking a steadying breath, Georgiana managed another smile, as if determined to set aside what she couldn't undo.
What's happening today?
She asked. Bethany caught the forced brightness in Georgiana's voice and followed her friend's lead.
Today,
she said,
we'll be fitted for dresses for the celebrations in 3 days. Candace has a new design she's been dying to make for us.
What celebrations?
Bethany set aside the brush and gently turned Georgiana's chair to face her. She perched on the edge of the bed.
Theo and Gregory are both turning 30,
she said. Georgiana was quiet for a few moments, considering. Then she asked,
Why does everyone speak in that special tone when they mention 30th birthdays?
Bethany started to answer, then stopped as a realization struck.
Oh, wow,
she breathed, her words fading into the quiet between them.
What is it?
Georgiana asked, the brow over her undamaged eye arching dramatically. Bethany felt a flush rise to her cheeks as the thought sank in. Finally, she managed,
Here in Estolia, men are expected to marry when they turn 30.
Georgiana's features softened, a hint of longing crossing her face.
It must be nice having your future settled,
she said quietly. Bethany frowned, surprise sharpening her voice.
What do you mean?
She couldn't see anything settled about her life. Georgiana looked genuinely puzzled.
If your Gregory is turning 30, then he must be preparing to marry you.
The riot of color on Bethany's cheeks doubled in intensity. Georgiana rose and turned to face her fully, voice gentle.
Your Gregory is in love with you. It's been clear since I first saw you together. As clear as your love for him.
Hope pierced through Bethany, impossible to contain. Only now did it dawn on her that Gregory's reserve might simply be the result of waiting for his 30th year, waiting, perhaps, to marry her. Somehow, she'd never connected his restraint to his faith. She'd always assumed, rather painfully, that he simply didn't care enough. Georgiana sighed, her fingers unconsciously tracing the scarred skin at her cheekbone.
I envy you, Bethany. No man would be interested in this.
Bethany shook her head, a small frown creasing her brow.
You're wrong about that, Georgiana. I think you underestimate how lovely you are. If anything, I'd wager Theo is as interested in you as you say Gregory is in me.
Georgiana said nothing. She turned back to the mirror, staring at her reflection for a long moment, her hand drifting again to the uneven skin along her jaw.
Smiled and spoke of stars so near, a life eternal without any fear. In her...
That evening, after dinner, Catherine, Gregory's mother, sat at the piano playing soft, restful music. For a while, gentle notes filled the room. Eventually, Leo invited his elegant wife to join him, and they began to sway across the floor. Bethany's heart fluttered when Gregory asked her to dance. She smiled to see Theo, with all his formal reserve, offering his hand to Georgiana as well. Bethany rested her cheek against Gregory's chest as they moved together. When his hand traced down her back, it felt as though he were brushing the very substance of her soul.
Bethany?
Gregory said softly, his lips close to her ear.
I am sorry I have been so distant.
I did wonder if you regretted the time you spent with me before I traveled to California.
The way he looked at her sent a ripple through her skin. His gaze held something she could not quite name.
Bethany, I could never regret our friendship.
He bent to kiss her, slow and certain.
You are the ray of sunshine that brightens my world. You have been since the day I met you.
One of her hands rested lightly on his chest, feeling the strong thrum of his heart beneath her fingers.
What are you saying, Gregory?
She whispered. She no longer wished to guess at the truth. His eyes locked on hers, and for a long moment they kept swirling to the music, silent in their own world. When the melody ended, Gregory gently led her to a quiet alcove at the edge of the room. Once she was seated, he took the chair opposite, close enough that their knees nearly touched.
Bethany, what I am saying is that I do not wish to remain apart from you. I love you. I want you to be with me from now until the end of time. There is nothing I desire more in this life than to be with you always.
You mean it, Gregory?
Oh yes, I mean every word, Bethany. But I need to know, are you willing to take me on? Will you be by my side from now until the end of our lives?
Her heart felt full to bursting. She remembered too clearly her father's withering remarks, the many times he'd compared her, always unfavorably, to the wife he'd lost.
"Children never mattered to me,"
he used to say, as if she herself were an afterthought. All she wanted now was for Gregory to need her, not just as she was, but for the family they might build together.
Bethany, I can think of no greater perfection than having you joined to me forever. To imagine our child growing within you, there's no blessing greater than that. Say you will be mine. Tell me you wish for me to be yours.
That was all she needed. She rose to her feet, and in a moment he was holding her close, his arms winding around her waist, kissing the tears and laughter from her face. After a while, a gruff voice broke into their quiet world. Xavier had wheeled himself over without a sound, appearing beside their secluded alcove.
"I think it's time the three of us had a chat,"
he said, eyes flicking from Gregory to Bethany and back. They made their way to one of the breakfast rooms. After Bethany settled into a chair, Gregory sat beside her. She turned and smiled at him, her thoughts lingering on how kind he was, the ease in his presence, how fine a husband he would make.
"Am I right in assuming you two have just decided to tie your lives together?"
Xavier asked, one eyebrow quirking up, his tone a blend of dry humor and something harder to name. Gregory nodded, never once taking his eyes off her. Xavier cleared his throat.
"Bethany, you have lived among us in Estolia for some time now. Yet even after all this, I would never presume you know every Estolian custom. Marriage here is not entered into lightly. It is a binding vow. There is no divorce, no separation. If you agree to marry Gregory, you are choosing to stay by his side for the rest of your life."
She felt as if her dreams were being served to her.
I remember what happened when Melanie got married.
"Indeed, it will be much the same,"
Xavier replied.
Marriage in Estolia follows a handful of sanctioned paths. The process is far more ceremonial if either party is born to the king or keeper. In Gregory's case, as he was meant to be keeper, ordinarily you would expect even greater spectacle, a wedding more elaborate than most. However, since his abdication, matters are different. I have considered his unique situation carefully. I am compelled to share with you both. Your bond is already sanctified by the Spirit, provided you wait until after the 11th hour on the eve of your birthday, Gregory, to consummate your union. Materially, this means that in just over 48 hours, if you both desire it, you will be brought to the secondary seclusion suite and will spend 7 days in seclusion. When you emerge, we will hold another celebration and declare you married not only for this life but in the life beyond, until time itself ceases together in Torrizon.
He grew solemn as he said this, looking from Bethany to Gregory and back again.
"Are you both able to wait that long?"
Yes, Uncle, we can. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Have a care that you are never alone together until the time I have already specified.
You keep my soul within a warm embrace. My Kaylee, my soul's safe resting place. Together we'll weave through night and morn, in a tapestry where dreams are born. A drift of zephyr, softest breeze, brushes skin, sets hearts at ease. Petals shimmer, stars above, every path designed for love. Moonlight stroll through scented air.
When I was a child, my parents discovered early on that my favorite gift, more than toys or trinkets, was a sheet of fancy graph paper. While other kids dreamed of elaborate, costly playthings, I was content with its perfect squares. It's no wonder I've come to see the temple, palace, and cathedral through a similar lens. As intricate designs waiting to be uncovered, retrofitting and modernizing these structures has become my pursuit, revealing hidden rooms, passageways, and chambers that history has long ignored. When I finish with the temple, I'll turn my attention to the palace. But already, I sense that both mountains hold far more than the records or the annals of history suggest, secrets buried deep beneath what's known, waiting to be discovered. Phoebe Zacarian, Preface, Magnificence, the Mount Estoliana Temple.
Georgiana watched Bethany and Gregory from beneath lowered lashes, a quiet observer, amid swirling music and candlelight. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if she might ever again know as much joy as she did just then. The answer shone on their faces. They had chosen to share their lives. Bethany glowed with a happiness so bright it seemed to spill over, while Gregory looked as if he'd drunk deep from some impossible well of delight. All the while, Georgiana found herself folded in the arms of Theo, the man she loved, hardly daring to believe she might ever be so blessed as to dance with him again. She released a quiet sigh, content to simply savor the solidity of the form holding her close.
The moon is shining,
Theo said once the last notes faded into silence.
Would you like to take a walk with me in the palace garden?
I would like that,
she said. Night air and soft shadows. Out there she wouldn't have to worry as much about being seen. As they walked and talked, her thoughts circled around the beautiful man at her side. She remembered how, upon meeting her, he'd immediately asked if he could call her Georgiana instead of George-Anne. Hearing it out loud offered so simply, she realized she'd never truly known herself before that moment. She'd always disliked her name, never quite at ease with it, bound by her father's rule that it must never be altered or shortened. Yet within minutes of meeting him, her old name and the person she'd been slipped quietly away, leaving her with a truer version of herself, one she was surprised to find she liked. When everyone in Estolia was introduced to her by her new name, she felt as if she finally discovered the person she was meant to be. George-Anne had been an unhappy young woman living with a tyrannical widowed father. As Georgiana, she was beginning to blossom, becoming confident, emotionally settled, and able at last to look ahead with hope rather than backwards with dread or longing. Theo was not the most conventionally handsome man she had known, but a quiet power drew the eye past any surface flaw. Tall and slender, almost spare, he carried an angular grace, light blonde hair, a determined jaw, and, since she'd come to Estolia, a neatly kept goatee. His eyes, strikingly silver-grey with a dark ring at the rim of each iris, seemed almost unearthly. Sometimes it felt as though Theo could look straight into her soul, or into the soul of any person who came before him. He worked alongside his father on tasks she could hardly name, their silent rhythms suggesting a knowledge passed through many hands. She found herself watching him in these moments, content just to absorb his presence, as if to learn the language of his spirit. Even if Theo never cared for her in a romantic sense, Georgiana felt it would be enough to live near him, to work beside him, to witness the quiet persistence and rare clarity of his faith each day of her life. Simply to be in his orbit felt like a privilege she did not want to forfeit. They walked together along the ornate pathways, deliberately designed, as Harmony had once explained, to heighten the senses of all who passed day or night. The paths offered beauty, flowers chosen for their night-blooming petals, leaves touched with silver, and pungent herbs pressed into the borders and between the stones so that every step released fragrance, deepening the bouquet surrounding them. After wandering through the garden for a while, he suggested they rest on a stone bench nearby. When she took her seat, instead of sitting beside her, he knelt down before her, his eyes steady and intent. He looked up at her, steady and deliberate.
Georgiana, here in Estolia, our faith shapes every facet of life. Each of us chooses to live by its edicts, and we are rewarded with the joy it promises. I am a religious man, and in time, I shall take my father Xavier's place as keeper. That commitment shapes the entire course of my life. Would you share that path beside me? From the moment we met, I felt something within me recognize you. No force in nature draws me as you do. Will you share that future role with me? Will you knit your heart, soul, and body with mine? Will you be my Kaylee, the keeper of my soul? Will you marry me?
Georgiana reached out, her fingers gently tracing the lines of his face. After a brief pause, she leaned toward him, and he closed the distance, their lips meeting in a tender kiss. When the kiss broke, Theo laughed, a sound so carefree it startled her. She marveled at the happiness in his voice.
You are so remarkable, so beautiful. You are the other half of my soul.
Silver leaves and velvet night, fingers tangled, spirits light, promise glimmering in your eyes, moonlight stroll where forever lies.
Dreams are painted in hues so bright, a future blooming in soft sunlight. With every step her heart takes flight, a love that grows through day and night. The greatest joy, her heart's new song, a bond unbroken, forever strong. Gregorio's name, a light divine.
When we were first tasked with transcribing, translating, and understanding the writings of Xavier and later of Key, it was nothing short of extraordinary. I still recall the scratchy, uneven handwriting of the postscript to Xavier's Addio, and the sense of awe I felt upon learning from Zeke that he wrote those final words in the bleak days between losing his Kaylee and joining her in Torrizon. He knew his message must be preserved, and his loyalty to Estolia was such that he would not allow himself to depart for his harmony until he was certain he had set down the last of his insights. That certainty, carried in each tremulous line, is why these words found their way to the heart, prepared to receive them. Kaylee Zacarian, living within the temple, the story of Key.
Bethany felt there was nothing more beautiful in life than the child she was expecting. Gregory often insisted the baby was a boy, but followed this with endless speculation about how beautiful their daughters would be.
You are so beautiful,
Gregory would say.
Our daughters are going to break the hearts of every man they ever meet.
Bethany and Gregory stayed in the tower suite after their wedding. The doctor suggested she wait until after the baby arrived to finish her work on the photographs and the coffee table book. They slept each night in the sun-warmed tower room, and Bethany felt there could be no greater happiness. She needed to be loved as Gregory loved her, and loved him just as deeply in return. In the months after their wedding, Bethany discovered firsthand that the old axiom held true. Marriages were indeed universally happy in Estolia. From within her own happiness, she saw bliss mirrored in other couples. Still, in quiet moments, she was certain no one could be as deeply in love as she and Gregory, nor could any match feel quite as wonderful, as beautiful, or as true. At first, Gregory intended to begin his elder year right after the wedding, but both Xavier and Theo urged him to devote his first year to Bethany instead. She welcomed this. His company was her joy. They spent their days together, rarely apart. Eventually, their conversations returned to her photographs, the ones she'd taken and developed before the pregnancy. Planning how to shape them into a book soon captivated them both. It added to Bethany's happiness to see her two closest friends, Melanie and Georgiana, so blissfully married themselves. Melanie and Sebastian busied themselves with their beloved and Estolians, nurturing the gentle bonds among the horses. It was Georgiana's transformation that struck Bethany most. Theo's devotion seemed to render Georgiana's scars and the absence of her arm invisible, or perhaps just unimportant. In time, Georgiana stopped seeing them too. She began to view herself through Theo's eyes, and what she saw there was startlingly beautiful. Confidence reshaped her, until even the palace residents seemed to forget what made her different. 8 days after their wedding, Theo stepped into his role as keeper, with Xavier ably assisting him. Georgiana, who had married Theo on the very same day as Bethany and Gregory, was now also expecting her first child. As names were tossed about, mostly boy names, Georgiana found herself especially taken with Jeremiah. Theo agreed without hesitation, his affection so apparent that even the most reserved Estolians could not help but smile at the warmth between them. Bethany, Georgiana, and Jackie, the Queen of Estolia, often spent their afternoons together. Jackie's son, Isaiah, was now everywhere at once, gleefully unconcerned with royal responsibilities that belonged to a much older version of himself. 6 weeks after the weddings, when both Georgiana and Bethany shared their news of impending motherhood, Jackie added her own with effortless cheer.
I'm pregnant too.
Bethany kept snapping photos of everything around her, even though she understood she'd have to wait until after childbirth to develop them. Sometimes she caught a rare look of deep sorrow flickering across Theo's face, and she wondered what troubled him. Yet for the most part, Theo appeared a very happy man, his quiet joy shining through in the moments he shared with Georgiana. The morning she woke and felt her water break, Bethany experienced a moment of pure, almost celestial happiness. Despite the dull, persistent pain crawling across her abdomen, her excitement for her baby boy's arrival overwhelmed everything else. She wished to name him Gregorio, though Gregory hesitated, worried it was too close to his own name. Still, he promised to indulge her. He quickly summoned the midwife, only to learn she was already busy attending Georgiana, and whispers hinted that Jackie might be on the verge of labor as well. Bethany's labor progressed slowly, tension rising with each hour. She was surprised when Xavier appeared, wheeling himself into the lower bedroom of their tower suite. Usually it was Theo who checked on her, sometimes pausing to offer a gentle blessing. Only then did Bethany recall Theo was likely with Georgiana, who was facing her own labor just a floor below. Xavier rolled up to her bedside and looked into her eyes.
I must give you a blessing, Bethany.
The words of the blessing were calm, but the pain sweeping over her muffled much of what he said. When he finished, her focus shifted sharply as the labor suddenly intensified. Just then, the midwife arrived, her presence swift and reassuring. In what felt like an instant, Bethany's entire world narrowed to the urgent sensation of bringing her beloved Gregorio into the world.
She feels the kick, a gentle sign, a fleeting moment, a glimpse divine. Two hearts beat now in perfect time, a melody of life's design. The greatest joy, her heart's new song, a bond unbroken, forever strong. Her laughter still echoes in his memory. The warmth of her touch trickles away. The deepest sorrow of the Estolian Way. Horizon will claim the couple this day.
When Kaylee and Jeremiah began transcribing the inscritos of Estolians, I was fascinated by the opportunity to trace the many seemingly unrelated references to the spirit grove found in those earliest records. Time and again, they described how Estolian women gathered deep within the spirit grove to commune with deity. As I sifted through these accounts, it always felt as if I was missing some hidden connection. When I prayed directly to deity for clarity, I found my interest in the question faded almost at once. It was only later in my life that I realized deity's answer was more about the information we Estolians were not ready to receive and less about the stories themselves. Meredith Palmer Zacarian, Estolian Religious Beliefs.
Nemski.
Xavier muttered under his breath in Swahili, a habit picked up in his college years, meant for moments just like this. He knew, with the strength of his former calling, that sorrow was going to visit the palace. Deity knew that any society granted only peace, happiness, and a lack of conflict was a society bound to stagnate and die. The number of tragic births was far lower here than in other countries, but they still happened. He did not wish for Bethany or Gregory to know how upset he was. Bethany had been deeply happy since coming to Estolia. For whatever reason, Theo felt, and Xavier agreed, that for her, happiness was inextricably bound to motherhood. The squall of an infant fractured Xavier's dark musings. Jessica, the midwife, placed the perfect baby boy in her patient's arms. Bethany smiled down, her gaze soft as she whispered,
Gregorio, Mortimer.
She looked up at Gregory, and in her face bloomed a joy so unmistakable that even the most stoic Estolian would have been moved. If happiness could be distilled, made pure and sharp, it still couldn't touch the brightness radiating from Bethany.
Gregory,
she breathed.
He's absolutely perfect.
Gregory and Bethany, bound forever.
Gregory sat on the bed, focused only on his wife and newborn as Jessica worked around them. He noticed how quickly she moved, and the blood slicked up to her elbows, sending a cold shock through him. Jessica caught his eye. He understood immediately.
I've sent for Samuel,
she said, voice tight. Her gaze shimmered with tears and a steady, heartbreaking certainty.
Darling?
Bethany said, drawing his focus back to her.
What is it?
Her voice sounded thin, edged with exhaustion.
Bethany, you are my life, the center of my universe, my everything.
Sorrow colored his words, and he saw recognition flicker in her tired eyes. She was pale, almost ghostly. She glanced at Jessica, seeing the truth reflected there, then turned to Gregory.
Will you hate him for taking me away?
She whispered. He swallowed hard against the ache in his throat.
No, my beautiful, extraordinary Kaylee, my heart, my soul. Gregorio will be loved and cherished every single day of his life.
He promised, voice raw. He did not say aloud that it would likely be Theo and Georgiana giving that love, not him.
I would rather...
She paused, shutting her eyes for a long moment. He feared she might not open them again. When she did, the strength of her soul shone through, a familiar, steady presence that had defined his days.
I would rather have 9 months married to you, Gregory, than 100 years without you. What woman, having known the happiness that walked with me every moment I've been in Estolia, would trade even 1 second of that away?
Jessica's voice was quiet, nearly lost in the hush of the room.
I need to clean the babe up.
Bethany gazed down at her son, his silver blonde hair no more than a shimmer, and smiled, pressing a kiss to his brow.
Always remember, Gregorio, how deeply you were loved.
Once her arms were empty, she turned her gaze to him, her heart luminous in her eyes.
I love you, Gregory Zacarian,
she whispered. Happiness and sorrow wound tightly together. Her hand traced his cheek in a feather-light caress, then slid limp to her side. He sensed she was gathering herself to say more, but all that lingered was the expectancy in the breath she never drew, the words left suspended between them. Gregory felt the most profound pain slice through him. He, like all Estolians, knew that no man could live without his soul. What he did not realize was how painful it would be to lose his Kaylee, the piece of himself now gone. He lay on his side next to her, gathering her close to his body, feeling her warmth, and yet realizing that for the first time ever in their marriage, her touch did not reassure, did not eliminate the loneliness. He wished to die. Gregorio would be cared for by his family. The only place he wished to be, the only place he belonged, was with his beloved Bethany.
Gregory.
Xavier said his name softly.
I am sorry, deeply sorry for your loss.
He gripped Gregory's shoulder and squeezed tightly.
Why? Why did Deity do it?
He asked. He gathered Bethany closer, as if the dwindling warmth of her body was the only life left within his own.
You knew she was right for you. Deity had 2 choices. Bethany was not like her friend Melanie. accepting barrenness with equanimity. She would have been filled with sorrow all the days of her life to be unable to provide you with a child. To her, having a child was deeply important. Deity knew that Bethany would have more happiness in 9 months with you than many people experience over a lifetime. Perhaps this is why you had so much time with her prior to gifting her your soul. I am sorry, Gregory. Realize that the only choice Deity had was to give her blissful happiness and a short life, rather than unhappiness all the days of a long barren life.
Xavier watched the pain slicing through his nephew's features and wished he did not have to accept the consequences of the Estolian Way. Every Estolian man knew that marriage was eternal, the consequences immutable. If his wife went before his time, death could and would bring a man down to the grave swiftly. Xavier reflected on the limited number of times that he was witness to an early death of a man's Kaylee. The elderly generally wrapped up their affairs. If the wife went before the husband, then the husband would take the time to meet with his sons and daughters, and with their children, and overall, he would say goodbye before quietly falling into that dream state wherein he would rejoin his Kaylee and shed the burden of a life lived too long. For Gregory, there was no clear-cut closure he could look back on. 1 minute she was there, and the next she was gone. The anguish that was coming from Gregory was palpable. Here was a man who would die of a broken heart long before the lack of his soul brought him to the grave. It would be unremarkable to find him passed away before the morning, his wife still cradled in his arms.
The keeper of his soul through Estolian ways, bound by a truth the stars won't betray, their souls entwined in Estolian way, through sorrow and sleep, love won't sever Gregory and Bethany. Lost in that night where shadows held sway, gone to horizon, to that distant horizon, the promising light of the Estolian Way.
During my years in Great Britain, I grew captivated by ancient languages, especially the origins of our Estolian tongue. Of all the words I studied, 2 stood apart. Kaylee, its origin remained hidden despite every effort, and Torizon, whose roots sprawled wider than sense would suggest. In one Nubian dialect, Torais carried 2 meanings, to feed the starving and, astonishingly, heaven. I found many other potential roots from which it may have sprung, but the Nubian root was the only one that made sense. Both Ki and Mari were of Nubian descent, as was Shania, the extraordinary woman who was Tremaine's Kaylee. With only 10 generations between Zacharias and that first set of twins, it was very likely that the fresh infusion of Nubian blood in the royal bloodline influenced the language. I now think of Torizon as that eventual place where the hunger that I have tried to feed my entire life, for knowledge, will finally be appeased, though it take an eternity to do so. Torizon is indisputably our word for the life after this life, wherein the purpose behind the grand design will become clear, and the most important elements of life, love and happiness, are eternal. Xavier Archimedes, Zacarian, Capitulo 86.
Jessica returned to their room with a newborn in her arms. For just a moment, Theo felt the shock of his cousin's anguish, severed from his soul. He recoiled inwardly from the depth of that pain and knew with certainty there was no way he could survive the loss of his Georgiana, his Kaylee, his everything. Georgiana looked up at Jessica, took in the nearly white-haired baby swaddled in her arms, then frowned and dropped her gaze to Jeremiah, who was nuzzling at her breast.
Bethany wasn't strong enough to bear a child,
Jessica said, her voice tight with exhaustion and sorrow. Theo could see the loss had reached her deeply. She was from England, still something of a newcomer here, and the grief that now pressed on the room was unlike anything she had faced. In 2 years as the palace midwife, Jessica had witnessed countless births, none shadowed by loss until tonight. She'd never carried away more than tears of relief. To mourn a woman she'd tended, that was difficult enough. But Gregory's agony, so raw and immediate, cut into her as well. Jessica would carry this night for some time. After the funerals, Theo would make time to offer her a blessing.
Deity claims those whose time is short, giving them great happiness in this life and greater happiness in Torreson.
Theo quoted one of the axioms of Estolia.
Gregory hoped that the two of you would be willing to raise Gregorio. Give him the love he deserves. Tell him about his parents.
Jessica said softly. She carefully guided the baby into the crook of Georgiana's left arm, adjusting her position so he could suckle comfortably, even without a hand. While the two infants nursed side by side, Theo assisted Jessica in tidying the room. When the babies finally drifted off, still clutching each other's hands, Jessica gently lifted Jeremiah, then Gregorio, and settled both in the bassinet. With the room quieter, Jessica spent another 15 minutes beside Georgiana, examining her, palpating her abdomen, then steadying her as she stood so that the soiled birthing bedding could be taken away and replaced with crisp linens. Once the bed was freshly made, Theo settled beside Georgiana, and Jessica brought both babies back to her. Gregorio had a full head of short, nearly white hair, while Jeremiah's was jet black. They looked like chess pieces.
I am told that the Queen is in labor,
Jessica said.
When I am finished with her, I will return to check on both babies.
Georgiana did not respond, having already drifted off to sleep. Theo barely registered Jessica leaving the room. His attention was on the two beautiful boys in his wife's arms. He gently caressed their downy heads, then closed his eyes and drifted off as well. When Theo woke, Gregorio was nuzzling eagerly at Georgiana's breast. Jeremiah, however, was fussing, his cries faint and uncertain. Theo reached out and touched his young son, and he was immediately inundated with images of Torreson, more than he could process, more than he wanted to know. He blinked quickly, trying to fight back the tears that threatened to spill over. Deity was as close to Estolians now as at any other time in their long history, and wanted Theo to understand that there was more available to the children of Zacharias than this simple, faith-filled life they enjoyed for as many or as few years as Deity granted them. His son, Jeremiah, was one of the blessed of Deity, and would be given the full blessings available to all Estolians. But not in this life. Theo would share with Georgiana these revelations, but not yet. Now was the time for grieving, for Bethany and for Gregory, and yes, for Jeremiah. A soft tap at the door preceded Jessica's entrance. She smiled, some of her earlier turmoil replaced by relief.
Lazarus Ezekiel is the name of the new prince.
She announced, her voice lighter.
It was a swift, uncomplicated birth, and the Queen was magnificent.
She paused at the bedside, brow furrowing as she regarded the two boys at Georgiana's breasts, especially little Jeremiah with his restless fussing.
Samuel is supposed to stop in and see you both in the next few minutes. Before he arrives, I want to examine Jeremiah closely. I'm not pleased with his color.
He lifted the tiny baby, Jeremiah, so perfect, and yet he was lacking something essential. He pressed the small baby to his chest, eyes shut against the rush of understanding overtaking his thoughts. Reluctantly, he returned Jeremiah to the midwife. In that instant, the child's soul departed, leaving only the empty shell of a child who needed no time on earth when compared to the other residents of Estolia. Theo felt as if his heart was almost ripped from his body. In this, as in all things, Deity provided the balm to ease the extreme pain of loss they would feel. Gregorio. They would raise him and give him everything he could ever need. And yet, the pain was still almost more than he could bear. He bit his lip to divert his thoughts from the spiritual pain towards a more bearable physical hurt. Georgiana opened her eye and looked down at the babe at her breast before looking at Theo. When she saw the tears streaking down his face, she looked from him to Jessica, And then she too felt the pain of separation. Theo could sense that Gregorio would heal his wife's pain in a way that a man could not understand. She would feel the wounds to their soul, but she was given the beautiful gift of a healthy baby boy to fill the void. He moved forward and climbed onto the bed next to his wife, holding her close, as they both looked at the perfect silver down on the head of the baby deity meant for them to raise.
I had a vision,
he said softly, brushing the hair back from her one eye.
There is a profound, significant, deeply satisfying life beyond this one. We are children, here in this mortal life. Deity shapes and guides us, prepares us to embrace all of the joys to be had in Torizon. The blessed, those who are ready for Torizon before they are born, need no time here in our waking world,
he said, closing his eyes on the truth. Whispering, he added,
Jeremiah is one of the blessed. Deity understood that we would need to give our whole hearts to Gregorio, so we were sent one of the most perfect souls to hold him briefly in our arms, to love him, and imprint him with our hearts and souls, so that he might take that little bit with him as he ventures into the next life. We will see him again, my love, and I have seen that reunion. He will watch over us all the days of our life and be there to greet us when we move on to our next great adventure.
Oh, Theo,
she said, accepting his words with the quiet faith unique to her most extraordinary soul.
Will we?
She paused and glanced down at the child at her breast, as if afraid of offending him by her words. She looked up with tears glittering on her lashes and finished her question.
Will we ever have a child that is made from our two souls to raise here on earth? Or will we only ever have the promise of Jeremiah in Torizon?
She was asking him to answer from the knowledge of his calling, rather than give empty, meaningless guesses. He felt the sweet warmth of deity wash over him, and when he spoke, he knew she could hear the strength of a promise from deity in his voice.
We will have a son and a daughter, in addition to Jeremiah in the next life, and the incredible added bonus of Gregorio in the here and now.
Her eye met his, seeing the truth within before looking again at the baby nuzzling with surprising vigor.
Gregorio, our beautiful son, may you be everything your parents would wish you to be in this world.
She reached up with her right hand and rubbed it over the silver down.
Jeremiah's cry.